Hello and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast, sponsored by Witchcraft.com. Now, you may have clicked on this seeing the words sectumsempra, thinking about Harry Potter and the wonderful world of Harry Potter and magic, and you might be thinking this podcast has something to do with Harry Potter. And I suppose you'd be right. However, this isn't a fan podcast for people that like Harry Potter. What we're actually going to be talking about is real life witchcraft. And yes, real life witchcraft does exist. So I suppose, Chris, where do we draw the line? What is it that things like Harry Potter get right? What is it that they don't get right? And I suppose nearer the end, we'll talk about how spells actually work. Because the kind of sectumsempra thing in the Harry Potter film or books, whatever, was someone making their own spell. And nowadays there is quite a big emphasis on buying spell books. They sell quite well on Amazon and in bookshops. And then it's a case of, I need a spell book to make magic work. When actually the best spells are the ones you create yourself. So
yeah, we're probably missing a trick there. We're probably missing a trick there.
We are probably missing a trick.
We probably should publish a load of grimoires, and then that way we'd probably make lots more money than we do.
Nowadays people are. There's no shortage of them, especially with self-publishing.
Yeah, but it does open up a lot of other options, doesn't it? Anyway, Harry Potter.
Yes.
Harry Potted.
And the magical world.
So, I think what's wonderful in a lot of ways, and kind of separates J.K. Rowling from people like Tolkien. And they are similar in the same way that obviously, or who's that one that does Discworld? My brain's not working. But what separates the three them is the fact that obviously they focus so much on a world that's already kind of there. So they create a world that is completely different. So it's not got no connection to the real world, quote unquote. Whereas with what J.K. Rowling attempts to do is essentially, and I think she gets it right mostly, is this kind of world behind the world. So it's a case of they've got this world of muggles, and then obviously the magical world is hidden from sight from the what we would call mundanes, and that magical world that's there. I just and she's clearly well researched. She's clearly read every possible mythology going. Probably read a few more of the occult books that most people these days probably have never even heard of.
The older ones.
The older ones, because you can't miss it.
Not Kate West. You mean?
I'm not talking about Kate West.
You mean like Agrippa and that sort of thing?
You're going to try and make me say the W word within the first 5 minutes.
No. Well, I don't know. I mean, are there any Wiccans in Harry Potter?
Wouldn't you call them, what's that word she uses for them? Squibs.
Ooh, no, that's nasty. You see, I wouldn't say that.
You did it. It's your fault.
No, I load the gun, you see, and then you shoot it. That's how this works.
I can't help it.
It's a brilliant partnership.
You goad me.
I know the listeners must love it, and if they don't, well, it's not going to stop because I love it too much. It makes me laugh out loud.
So yeah, I suppose for me, it's one of those where if you take away the wands. Although there is an aspect of that in kind of what they're doing with the later books and what they did with the kind of spin-off, if you can call it that, with the Fantastic Beasts, is that where they do kind of start to talk about magic without words and magic without wands.
The ancient form, I think they call it in kind of Harry Potter, isn't it? Ancient magic.
So I can kind of, I can get a bit more on board with that. I think either way, it's a beautiful world that she's created, and I like that so much of it stays very true to the mythologies that are there before, whereas lots of other writers do kind of try and put their own stamp on it. Whereas I do think she really does bring out the very best, particularly of some of the traditional elements, should we say, with the creatures that she uses and all that sort of stuff, that reaches anyone that's actually, you're not going to be disappointed to go and read a book on mythology after reading Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Like I like that. I like that kind of true to the original material, but has used it to build this incredible world. Go on.
Being a professional witch, like me, and having worked together, I probably know the answer to this question, but I'm sure some people would have it. How many people come to you after seeing something like Harry Potter or reading something like Harry Potter or whatever else is on television, such as Shadowhunters or Charmed or whatever, and ask, is real magic like this? What is it? Is there really a magical world? I had one the other day, which is basically like, you're a witch. Does this Harry Potter magical world is it actually a thing, or do you all live here, or how does that work, kind of thing? And it's kind of the case of, I suppose, how much of it does she get right? Because she's not, J.K. Rowling isn't a witch, and she doesn't have much of an interest in witchcraft.
No, she does like alchemy, though.
Yeah, she's admitted to being interested in alchemy and stuff like that. But like,
and she definitely turned paper into gold, so
yeah,
she's
definitely,
possibly capable of it.
But it's a case of like, you'd never learn magic from watching Harry Potter, and it works very differently. But it does inspire you to a certain extent, and you can kind of, to a certain extent, like you've talked about mythology, you see lore, and you kind of see archetypes there, but not really like some things that you can literally read or look at, and it's similar in style and practice to real magic. I know there are some people out there that use wands and brooms and things like that. I know we're not that. It's not our cup of tea.
But they're representational, though, aren't they? Yes. It's not, they don't point wands and brightly coloured sparks come out the end. And I suppose the visual aspect for it, I love, even though it's so far from reality.
In most
but then it also, in circumstances, and also depending on what set of, glasses you're currently wearing. Yeah. If you're visually seeing the world, you probably see a lot more of that colour that is there. She's not wrong when it comes to actually talking about energy. Or if you wanted to talk about auras and how somebody's energy levels change and manipulating energy.
That's the thing. Like,
she's not wrong.
People will look at that and they'll say, well, do witches, do they use a wand and then fire some energy at something and then it all lights up and that? Can I do that? And the answer really that a lot of witches, certainly online and in books and stuff, will say is no, you can't do that. But in reality, that's not exactly true.
Not exactly true, no.
Like with a lot of things in film and stuff like that, is that you're trying to represent something. So that energy that's there, that's being fired out when you do that sectumsempra spell or whatever it is, a witch with a decent enough psychic ability can see, feel and sense that. So yes, you can see it. It just means that not everyone can see it. And they do kind of have that idea of the squib, don't they, in Harry Potter?
Yeah. Coming from a magical family, but not being capable of doing it.
Yeah, so they can see it. They can see they can see the Dementors and stuff like that. They just can't really do it.
Yeah.
Is that a danger? I mean, what do you think about the kind of idea of you have to be born a witch?
I don't like that concept. I was going to say that. I don't. It's like a
common question,
but it is a common question. You don't have to be born one, and I get a bit shirty with the Insta witches and who talk about these 10 signs you're a witch, that sort of thing.
I did one of those videos, don't you?
Yeah, well, I think I probably said it was a good idea at the time, probably.
Well, it was a joke.
But it is one of those things where it's those looking for those characteristics of what make you, you may tick the box of sensitive, might give you a leg up in that direction, but if you don't have that, it's like at the end of the day, which it's called a craft for a reason.
Yeah.
witchcraft, you can get, depending on where you start, will depend on how quickly you get to the next stage. It means that even if you've never done any of it before, there is nothing stopping you working hard at it until you get good at the craft. Yes, natural ability goes a long way, but at the end of the day, you could start from nothing and still make a pretty decent witch by the end of it. The difference is you might not be one of these that becomes a great witch, and that might be the difference.
Well, I suppose, yeah, archetypally, if you think about some of the main characters, you've got the idea of the kind of Neville Longbottom. He's an idiot, but with the right teacher, he did manage to master something. You know, he managed to do something. Then you've got like Hermione Granger. When you've got the nerd, she like constantly puts herself under tremendous pressure, and she gets considerably far.
And she's playing catch up on the basis that she's not part of that world, where yet she turns out to be one of the best at it. I think there's a certain part of that that's there. If someone has enough drive and ambition to get somewhere, it doesn't matter what subject you're referring to, but witchcraft is no different from that.
Yeah. But then when you look at the comparison between the two, I suppose, Hermione Granger reminds me a lot of like the Albus Dumbledore character, in the fact that when he was at school, he really applied himself, kind of a thing, and he never stopped. It was always accomplishing something more. Whereas in the magical community, in the magical world, both in the reality and also in Harry Potter, it's a case of, well, when you graduate, that's about it. You only really need to get to the stage where you can make the cauldron wash itself up and do a little bit of this, and then we've got technology such as flu powder for the rest. So
somebody else has thought of some brilliant part of it, and I think that's kind of what I love about it, is it's a replacement of all those technologies that we talk about, and I kind of love that idea that there is a because she's not wrong, but the fact is the two worlds are much closer. There are periods in time where what was now called science was called magic. So, you know, that technology does run alongside. There is that kind of magic, fantasy and sci-fi are both those kind of fields that constantly allow scientists to reinvent the wheel. In this kind of, you know, somebody's dreaming up some crazy idea and they're like, oh, well, if I apply this, this and this, I'll get that. And I think what you know, J.K. Rowling does with that is create this world where it's kind of like they're two separate things. And that actually there is a magical equivalent to and I quite like that two-sided coin thing that she's got going on. And I suppose a divide, you can look at it in different ways, which is that divide natural ability, like you were talking with the Muggles being not able to see, or is that gatekeeping?
Well, I know that in like television at Charmed, they had the kind of actual witch blood where their blood was actually physically different. But no, it's interesting you pick up on like the cultural aspects in that, because of course the iconic view of the witch is the broom and cauldron carrying person, the person that's fixed in that point of time, and that's illustrated interestingly in Harry Potter in the fact that they're around the modern world and they wear normal clothes, but for ceremonies and stuff, it does echo back to a time gone by. But also, their technology from a scientific perspective only advances to the point in which it's needed. So they still use the cauldrons and that, and they don't need heating because they can do a spell for that. So you can kind of see the technology.
They don't need a computer because they can get the quill to type itself.
And they have maths charms and all that kind of thing, spells and stuff for that kind of stuff. So, you know, and culturally it's kind of a case of like people expect to see witches dressed in long robes, wear pointy hats and that kind of thing because they see it in Harry Potter. But what they're missing is the fact that because in Harry Potter there's a magical community that's secret, it develops its own culture. So, of course, within that they have their own system of government, their own morality, that kind of thing. Whereas you need to remember that in the real world, witches walk among you. So they're going to be a part of the culture that you're from, or they're going to be a part of a culture from another part of, you know, the world. So it's no good kind of looking at for something slightly different. Like,
No.
you know, most of the ones in here at the moment are rocking the Abercrombie.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but
That's
it's one of those things.
and I don't own a single robe except maybe a
Yeah.
bathrobe.
But I mean, it's interesting from that because, of course, with Harry Potter, she just looks at it from the cultural perspective. So these robes don't really do anything. But from the ceremonial magician's perspective, then it's a case of, well, actually, these robes are magical, so they are a magical use. Whereas it's purely kind of ceremonial and from a historic
Utilitarian.
perspective, yeah, from in
Harry
Potter, which is interesting. But I do like the fact that, like, you get the idea of the mandrake in that. Whereas kind of like, well, in the Harry Potter universe, does that mandrake speak and move for a mundane or a muggle? Because obviously from the magical perspective is the fact that when you work with plants and energies and stuff like that, there is that kind of communication
Working relationship.
on a psychic level, and that they will tell you things and you do learn about them that you don't learn if you don't have that connection. And that's an interesting illustration from the mandrake, because it's physically moving for one person and then for another it's kind
Potentially
of
not at all.
Yeah, exactly. But what do you think the dangers are with Harry Potter and the universe, and the kind of fact that there's, I wouldn't say it's misinformation, because at the end of the day it's fiction and a story, but what do you think that people see and then they just really don't get over the fact, and they're kind of like, I don't understand, it's like that in Harry Potter, why isn't it like that in the real world, kind of thing? Is there sticking points?
I guess part of it is it's fluffy. Even though they've got dementors and like that, that other people would kind of say, oh, well, isn't that all like evil and scary and that sort of thing? But no, it's fluffy bunnies. You can throw light at them and they'll run away. Like,
literally.
Literally, that is what you're talking. And I think part of it is
there's clear black magic and white magic as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Borgin and Burkes. We are the Borgin and Burkes of the physical world.
Well, pretty much. If you can't get it elsewhere, you'll find it with us.
Yes.
It is very much one of those. But yeah, I think like you say, the danger is more that there is an assumption that it's because it's so close with how well she's integrated the mythology.
Yeah.
That there is that assumption that somebody who's mundane would assume that the next part of it works the same way. Well, if they got that bit right, but they obviously got that other bit right, and that must mean that obviously ones are shiny, sparkly things and are great. Like, I suppose that's the kind of the danger. It's
the thing with anything. I mean, think about these docudramas and stuff like that are based on a true event. It's like you're supposed to be telling a trial or something that happened in history. It's kind of like, even when they're trying to attempt to explain something that actually happened, they don't really get it fully right. Whereas this isn't even attempting to do that. J.K. Rowling clearly hasn't set out to teach magic.
No, she's creating a fictional world.
Yeah. Many authors do that are interested in the occult. They often hide secret messages and things like that within works. And certainly prior to the repeal of the Witchcraft Act in 1950 in the UK, authors would very often get their magical knowledge out there by publishing fiction. And you'll find that it has extremely boring storylines because you're not supposed to be following the story. You're following what the characters are physically doing. Like that Gerald Gardner, obviously founder of the W word, created his, where he was putting rituals in books, but he couldn't say this is witchcraft. He had to say this is fiction about, a story. Yeah. And the story's rubbish and the characters are rubbish because he wasn't interested in that.
And that same problem we've kind of covered before with the one about psychics. We covered that part of, because you have to say the word for entertainment purposes.
Entertainment purposes only. Yeah.
Is that cut off that kind of goes, oh, okay, well, none of this is real anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So you've kind of got that issue of people don't take it seriously enough that then dabble.
Yeah.
Or will read something, and the problem is it creates that whole bunch of words that are on the internet, because that's the biggest danger, I think, more than anything, is all those storylines, all that kind of fan fiction that happens afterwards gets mixed up with the day-to-day stuff that's also on there.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, obviously I'm not talking about the W word, there's plenty of that stuff around there that you may as well be reading Harry Potter for, but you just mean, you know, that mixture there means if I search the word mandrake, how many versions of mandrake am I going to find that actually take you as far away from magical practice as possible? And I think is that kind of the danger, that there's too much of it that's too similar that allows it to be misinformation.
Yeah.
And then whose job is it to clear that up? Like, you know, it's just, like I said, I think it's amazing, and they're incredible.
Well,
and
it resonates with people, and I've
Yeah.
met Christians and that often say, well, it's easy for you people because everyone resonates with magic and people are just naturally drawn to this stuff. And it is true. I mean, it's a cult phenomenon, not just because she's, you know, quite a great author and has made this cool world. It's because it actually resonates with so many people that they feel something, there's some kind of undercurrent that they know appeals to them on a level they can't explain, and that is magic. The problem is most people don't then go and seek it out, and if they do, they often don't necessarily find it.
No, and most people are happy with just dressing up.
Yeah,
you know, buying the wands and all the other wonderful things that who produces it all? Oh, is it Warner Brothers that own the rights to most of it?
I don't know, to be honest with
Who
you.
produce all these wands in all shapes and sizes for the specific characters, and they, you know, it's a whole phenomenon. It's not just a book, you know. The movies, the merchandise, every shop on the high street is trying to rip off some version of Harry Potter because they know it's popular, including us. Yeah,
we just happen to actually use magic with the Harry Potter kind of stuff. We'll make your Harry Potter object work. We can actually teach you how to make a Horcrux, and you won't need to kill anyone. You won't need a wand, and you won't need to kill anyone to do that. You know, that's real magic. You can do that. You know, sectumsempra. Then, you know, how they made the spell in Harry Potter. Now, J.K. Rowling talked a little bit about spell work, how it works in Harry Potter, and people can do their own research on that. What they really want to know is how does it actually work in
I think
real magic.
What's particularly, you know, because obviously that's the Half-Blood Prince storyline with Severus Snape. Like, you know, that goes right to the. You'd have to really start with the potions book in that one, where these spells work better with these tweaks, and I really like that. Like,
it's real life, isn't it? That's it. Experimentation. There's something to be said for experimentation.
Definitely.
And there's also something to be said that the person that writes the book makes it difficult for you because you have to put some work in. They're not giving it all away, even when it's an instructional book.
Exactly. And the fact is, at the end of the day, even if you... Well, the thing is, it goes back to cooking. You know, we always use that analogy, don't we?
Yeah.
Which is that, you know, you have the cookbook in front of you. If you're following those instructions to rote, you're not focusing on what you're cooking, are you? And the fact is that actually what you need to be doing is, I've read it a couple of times, I understand what these ingredients do, how they interact with each other. If you understand how bread rises and how the air bubbles are created from the bicarbonate mixing, like, then it's a case of you then understand what the magic is underneath it and what's actually happening, that allows you to then go, oh, okay, I understand how that works. I don't need the book anymore. What I need is these ingredients, and actually my personal taste, I always like to put a little bit of Tabasco in, you know, or whatever the random ingredient is. That secret ingredient everyone always talks about. What's your secret ingredient that makes this taste so good? Like, I think that it crystallises in the best possible way of how you should read any spell book that's out there, is take it with a pinch of salt, read it. If you don't like it, change it. Like, why I don't understand why anybody would follow a spell that they don't like the sound of, or
It's because they don't understand how it works. They think of words of power, because like in Harry Potter, spell work is all about like the spoken word. Although I know J.K. Rowling says that it isn't, because she's kind of talked about the idea of the fact that it focuses your
yeah,
mind to say these things, and you'll see that with real spell work in the fact that the words don't mean anything. They're to get you into the right frame of mind to direct and raise the energy itself. I mean, we do potions making classes where we will help you make potions and teach you how to work with that. When it comes to spell making and spell work, I always tell students and stuff like that to get all the spell books and chuck them in the loft or throw them out, put them in the bottom of the cupboard, because you're never going to use them again, because you don't.
you
It's
don't need
not
them.
like chemistry. It's not like chemistry. People often confuse
Yeah,
chemistry because they think this ingredient plus this ingredient must have that effect, when it's not like that. Yes, there are instances when you talk about other things that you're incorporating, such as herbal medicine, you're not going to start eating poison plants.
yeah,
However, when it comes to the pure magic, which is really what spell casting is, because that kind of gets the point across, I think, also in Harry Potter, the fact that with the potions making, you're thinking of like mundane, there's kind of some kind of use to all these ingredients,
yeah.
and
They're
then
always
you're
to do
adding,
something or get a job
yes,
done, aren't they?
yeah,
They're
and
not
that
about.
there's magical use involved as well. However, the spell casting is pure magic on the in the Harry Potter side, and in reality, I think that might be where people get unstuck, is the fact that spell casting is a lot more complex than it is in Harry Potter. So you can't just give someone a spell and it work for everyone, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And
but
it's not
there we
going to
go.
work in the same way for everyone. It
Yes.
may work, but it
Yeah.
may not work in the way that it could, because that you are in the driving seat for it. So if you don't believe the words you're speaking, or I don't agree with the ingredients that you're using, then why are you doing any of that? Because essentially those are worked for one person. Then you could go to the more sinister line, and we can talk about sigils, and not using other people's sigils. But
Yeah.
and the dangers with that. But again, that's all down to somebody understanding how a sigil works, and therefore what their purpose is,
Yeah.
and actually going, well, actually, I probably really shouldn't use that, should I? Because that was created for somebody else for a different purpose.
Mm.
And I think that happens a lot with a lot of spell work, is the case of, well, stop doing it. Like, obviously we teach in a very organic way.
Yeah.
You only have to look, and I think you did a couple of videos on it somewhere or other, on how our charm bag class works.
Yeah.
We have a very simple formula for those pieces being put together and the order that they go in, but every individual goes away with a completely different bag on the
Yeah.
basis that they're selecting their items blind. Yes, you'll fit the
Yeah.
categories. You've got items from each category, but how many of those they put in and what they are and what they're for is entirely judged by their instinct and how they read those ingredients.
Well,
Um,
like food you were talking about earlier, a curry is a curry, and spaghetti bolognese isn't a curry, but you can tweak spaghetti bolognese so much that you can get 100 dishes together and they're all going to be different and have different
yeah,
flavors. Same with curries, you can make so many different curries. So it's really understanding from the student's perspective of, okay, so where do I draw the line between what a charm bag is and what a candle is, or where do I draw the line of what's
yeah.
spaghetti bolognese? I shouldn't say spaghetti bolognese because the Italians don't like it. And but there
Yeah,
we go. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, there's so much to talk about with Harry Potter that I'm sure we'll end up doing more podcasts kind of delving into the deeper
more
aspects.
specifics.
Like we're about to go into extra time for the Thoth Witchcraft Patreon, so the extended podcast. So where do you want to kind of start delving into now then? It's difficult.